I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And together we host a true crime podcast called The Prosecutors.
Every week we bring our perspective as prosecutors to some of the toughest cold cases of all time.
Disappearances, murder, mayhem, you name it, we'll cover it.
So join us for a true crime podcast with a different point of view.
Because we are The Prosecutors.
This episode is brought to you by the Slash and Cast Podcast Network. Learn more at slashandcast.net.
Welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. Today's episode is a very special collaboration with my great friend CJ of the podcast Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBT. First, you'll hear her tell a story about Paris Cameron, Alunte Davis, and Timothy Blancher, and then I will tell you the story of Evon Young. I also want to make a quick announcement about the Amanda Pierce series. For some reasons that look hopeful, Kimberly and I have put the series on hold for maybe 2 weeks, but we will be back at it as soon as possible. Please keep Amanda's family in your thoughts, prayers, send good vibes, whatever it is that you do. I'm asking that you please do so. So now I will let CJ get us started.
Thanks, Paige. Many of us have grown up in a society that taught us that being gay, bi, or trans is not normal in society. We're told it is bad or sick to be anything but attracted to the opposite sex. What this has done is to make us fear anything different than the normal we've learned. It breeds an internalized homo or transphobia. I remember when I was 17, I worked at a softball complex. I played softball at that same complex, but when I wasn't working or playing, my mom and I would go and watch some of the games. I'd point out the really butch-looking lesbians on the field, as if my mom couldn't tell, and I'd call them shims, a she-him. It wasn't very nice. I believe it was my way of deflecting the truth about who I was. I went on to live in denial of who I was for another 9 years, but I still felt attraction to some women. That's the other misconception I'd like to clear up. Just because someone's a lesbian doesn't mean she wants or is attracted to all women. Like gay men aren't attracted to all men. For us, and I think I can speak for most of the LGBTQ community with this, like heterosexual people, there has to be some sort of chemistry. It's not all physical and it's not all emotional, but it's a combination of the two. Naysayers would ask me, then why aren't you attracted to men? Honestly, I am. To a degree. Well then, CJ, you must be bisexual. Or if it were the South, I'd be bisexual. That was for you, Paige. Nope, I'm a lesbo. I can think Bradley Cooper is hotter than fuck, and I could even use my hall pass with him for one night. But in reality, first off, I'm not going to score Bradley Cooper. Second, I can only envision myself spending every aspect of my life with another woman, should I ever happen to meet the right one. As I've said before, I believe people are a little more sexually fluid than they know they are. Both men and women. But that concept can be very confusing for some people who are not willing to live their truths. It can be frightening and angering. We've learned in some of the other past cases I've covered, it can destroy someone inside, and it can make someone kill another because of their own self-hatred. 19-year-old Devin Robinson lived directly next door to a gas station, food mart type shop. The early morning hours of Saturday, May 25th, 2019, Devin was hanging out in front of the gas station, something he normally did when he was bored or trying to stay out of trouble, or if he needed a quick soda and a bag of Doritos. 21-year-old Alunte Davis and 20-year-old Timothy Blancher also happened to be at the gas station when Devon was there. In Alunte and Timothy's company was a very cute girl. The girl was about Devon's age, and she approached him. Her name was Paris Cameron. Paris was a 20-year-old trans woman. Paris thought Devon was hot, and she told him as much. She and Devon exchanged some flirtations, and she told him she was on her way to a nearby party for some freaky fun. He asked her about the party, and that's when Paris took the opportunity to invite him. 3 years prior to this night, Detroit had launched Project Greenlight. Project Greenlight's a program that hooked up CCTV footage at some of the gas stations and streets where there was high risk for crime. Videos were captured of the interaction between Devon and Paris. Devon would walk towards her, and then away from her like he was leaving, and then back to her, then away again, then back to her like he was unsure. Or perhaps he was even conducting some kind of mating dance. Finally, Paris left for the party with her 2 friends, Alunte and Timothy. Devon is seen leaving towards his home. Not long later, Devon is viewed on camera again. He's walking towards the party. Witnesses say Devon, who identifies as a straight man, had several sexual encounters at the party that night, and one of the encounters was with Paris. After Devon left the party, some of the partygoers said Devon had a blank, almost lost look on his face. He's again seen at the gas station on his way home. He's spitting and he's dry heaving. Something at the party apparently didn't set well with him. Again, he's seen on the footage walking off towards his home. About an hour later, a figure with the same build as Devon Robinson, clad in a black hoodie, is seen on CCTV. The figure is running towards the house party. Within minutes, the door to the party is kicked in by the hooded man. The man begins shooting a gun he's brought with him. 5 people were shot before the assailant fled the party. The figure in the hoodie is seen again on the Project Greenlight video. He's running towards Devon's home. With 5 people shot at the party, 2 of the victims survived. 3 of them had succumbed to their injuries and died. The young gay men I had mentioned earlier were 2 of the murdered victims. The 3rd person murdered was Paris Cameron. Paris was born under the sign Leo in 1998. She was described by friends as a flower. She thrived being around people who loved her. She was energetic and vibrant. They said Paris was sensitive, compassionate, protective, and loving. Paris was a dancer and she loved to vogue. That's the type of dance from the queer ball culture that you can see portrayed on the show Pose. Paris was good at it, too. She enjoyed cooking and studying cosmetology, and she loved to watch reality television, especially Bad Girls Club and RuPaul's Drag Race. Paris's biological family loved her, but they struggled with her being trans, and this was very hard for Paris to understand the kind of love they offered. All Paris really wanted was a family to love and accept her fully for who she was. Her ex-boyfriend Jordan had said that Paris lived with him and his mom for a while they were together. He said Paris had a huge heart and the transition from lovers to friends was really easy with her. Their love for each other was still there. The relationship just looked differently. Jordan's mom said she was a sweet girl, but she had a nasty habit of leaving her lashes in the bathroom. Jordan finished by saying he knows Paris is advocating right now in heaven to legalize twerking. Devon Robinson was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. At his trial, the prosecution believed the victims were murdered because of trans and homophobia. But let's face it, most trans and homophobic people suffer from internalized self-hatred. And it's because of the fear society has trained them to have against LGBTQ people. In most cases, the person suffering from the self-hatred just can't deal with their feelings of attraction because, oh my God, that might mean they are gay. As of this episode, there are no laws banning trans and homophobic panic defenses in the state of Michigan, where Devon's trial took place. At the end of the trial, a jury found Devon guilty of 3 counts of premeditated first-degree murder. He was also found guilty of 2 counts of assault with the intent to murder and felony firearm possession. The judge sentenced the teenager to 3 life terms in prison with no chance of parole. To add to that, he received 10 to 20 years for assault with the intent to murder for each of the 2 injured people at the party, and another 10 years for possession of a firearm. Devon Robinson will have a good, long time to sit and reflect about his choices that took the lives away from 3 young LGBTQ people. To be quite honest, I was a little surprised Devon was convicted of premeditated first-degree murder. To me, his killings seemed to be a little impulsive, not very well thought out, but the jury saw it differently.
I've come to tell you the story of Evon Young, a young transgender male who was brutally murdered in Wisconsin. Unfortunately, as most cases go, it was so hard to find a lot of information about Evon, which always makes me sad. But I did my best with what I could find. Let's get started. At 22 years old in 2013, Evon Young, a transgender male, was a local Milwaukee rapper. He went by the name of Young LT. He was always performing rap shows and recording music. Evon had learned how to market his music and promote shows. He was so passionate about all of it. Many sources say that even though his music was about partying, that nobody really saw him doing the things that he rapped about, saying that Evon didn't subscribe to much of the thug image. Evon and 26-year-old Billy Griffin were at the house they shared when they heard the doorbell ring. 27-year-old Victor Stewart, 37-year-old Ron Allen, 23-year-old Devin Seabury, and 19-year-old Ashanti McAllister were the ones waiting on the other side of the door. They were in the Chicago-based gang called the Black P. Stones. When the 4 men came into the home, they made their way to the kitchen. They were all hanging out, and eventually an argument commenced. Sources say that Billy believed Evon had conspired with these men to have their home robbed. Allegedly, all the men told Billy he could be in the gang again if he murdered Evon. Billy told the cops that they all began to swing punches on Evon because they claimed that he couldn't be trusted. They all took Evon down to the basement, where they strangled him with a chain, covering and duct taping his head and face with a plastic bag until he was unconscious. These men began to beat and batter Evon with tools. Billy claims that he could not stand to watch all of that any longer and went back upstairs. By his account, he says he overheard the other men saying they had to make sure Evon was dead, followed by 3 gunshots of a semi-automatic handgun. Ashanti McAllister supposedly was the one who shot Evan at least 3 times. Billy said that everyone scrubbed the basement clean with bleach, rolled up Evon's body into a curtain sheet, hauled his body into Victor's wife's car, and then to a dumpster near an apartment, which later that night they set the dumpster ablaze. Evon's mother only knew that her son didn't show up for work on January 1st, which was strange and out of character for him. He didn't even show up to come visit her as he normally would, and she couldn't get in touch with him. On January 2nd, his mom, Annette, filed a missing persons report with the Milwaukee Police Department. Evon's roommate, Billy Griffin, told police that Evon went outside their house about 10:30 that night, January 1st, that he got into a car and never came back. Unbeknownst to the police, his mom, and many others, Evon had been tortured and killed that day. Evon's family immediately began to post missing flyers everywhere. They even went on television, hoping that others would help them find Evon. Coincidence, or maybe not, 2 other young men had vanished earlier that New Year's Day downtown after drinking with some friends. The Milwaukee police officers started going down all avenues, working with the puzzle pieces they had, and finally they began to realize that Billy Griffin had lied to them. Evon's mom, Annette, stumbled upon a cell phone where Billy Griffin said that Evon had allegedly gotten into someone's car. The last call made on the phone was January 1st. When she turned in the phone to the police, they were able to trace it back to Victor and Ashanti. The police decided to question Victor's wife, and she said that Victor had taken off with her car without her permission on the 1st, and when he came back on the morning of the 2nd, it had an empty bleach bottle inside, and the smell of bleach in the car was so strong. Victor's wife proceeded to grab the bleach bottle and put it under her sink at home. Police would later find duct tape from the basement of Billy and Evon's, and Victor's fingerprints were all in the car. According to authorities, they say that the basement was allegedly wiped down and scrubbed with bleach, which pointed to the bleach bottle found in Victor's wife's car, and it did match up with what Billy said. DNA, blood, a chain, and burned clothing were collected at the crime scene. Billy Griffin and Victor Stewart reportedly confessed to the police. The authorities went and searched a landfill on January 23rd, or some sources say the 28th, because by the time they were given this information, the dumpster had already been picked up and emptied 17 days prior at a transfer station before being transported to the huge landfill in Menominee Falls, or quite possibly another landfill. Authorities were examining a 200 by 200 feet area of the landfill with the help of cadaver dogs. After 13 days of finding nothing, the search was called off. Even though the police did not have a body, they, along with prosecutors, were hopeful that since they gathered a lot of evidence at the crime scene and had statements from the murderers, it was sure to secure a conviction in this horrendous case. All of the men were arrested and charged for Evon's murder. A court hearing was held on January 31st, 2013. All the men pled not guilty to first-degree intentional murder. These are the trial dates that were set for the defendants. Billy Griffin was on June 10th, 2013. Ron Joseph Allen and Ashanti McAllister were on June 24th. Victor Stewart's was on July 1st. And Devin L. Seabury was on July 8th. Victor Stewart and Devin Seabury were the state's primary prize witnesses in the trial of Ashanti McAllister. Victor and Devin decided to take the deal of pleading guilty to second-degree reckless homicide in return for testifying for the state. Victor and Devin said that the two of them, as well as Ashanti and Ron, were driving to Billy Griffin's place on January 1st, searching for marijuana. Ashanti and Ron started scuffling with Evon when Victor, the gang general, got his gun and fired a bullet into the kitchen floor. Victor said that this was to assert his authority. He also claimed that when Evon was being led down to the basement, Ashanti then took the gun, which was a .22 semi-automatic silver handgun. Victor said that he and Billy stayed upstairs to smoke weed. The gun in question was actually stolen from Bruce Christopher. He said Ashanti robbed the gun from his house when Ashanti had stayed there New Year's Eve. Bruce said that he did not know of the Black P. Stones gang, even though Victor said Bruce was a member. Bruce faced a felony charge of being in possession of a firearm. In Ashanti's trial, gang tactics were the main focus point. Both lawyers used facts about the chain of commands in gangs and strategies to prove, or in the defense attorney's case, disprove, intent and for the defense attorney to debate available evidence. Ashanti's attorney, Tom Erickson, argued that the phone traced to Ashanti, which was found outside of Evon Young's home, was really the phone used by all of the members of the gang. On the state side, Assistant DA Grant Hubner talked about the horrors of gang retaliation, and that alone would cause Victor and Devin's statements they gave to the police to be contradictory. Victor was asked, quote, "What is the P. Stone's punishment for cooperating with police?" Victor replied, "Death." The assistant DA went on to insist Ashanti absolutely shot Evon with intent to kill in the basement as Ron suffocated him with the plastic bag and choked him out with a hefty metal chain. All the while, Ashanti had Evon at gunpoint. At the end of his statement, the assistant DA said, quote, "Ashanti McAllister was ready, willing, and able to assist in the murder of Evon Young. That's party to a crime. That's guilty." Attorney Erickson debated that there wasn't even evidence of Ashanti's alleged role in the murder, or proof that he had even been in the basement at all. Erickson pointed out discrepancies in Victor and Devin's stories and went on to name 10 differences between their stories in his closing statement. Speaking to the jury, Attorney Erickson asked them to think about how Victor and Devin are ruthless and cut deals for a lesser charge, telling the jury that could be motivation for them to deceptively testify. Attorney Erickson also gave an alternate story as to what happened in the basement. He said Victor was the one who shot Evon Young. The other gang members, he said, were forced to, quote, "toe the party line," and make up lies protecting Victor because they were afraid for their lives if they went against him. DA Grant Hubner replied that there was no DNA or fingerprints tying any of the men who were charged to that basement because it had been cleaned with bleach. There was nothing at the time to link DNA to the gun because they hadn't found it, and Evon's body had not been found either. However, there were fingerprints on Victor's wife's car that belonged to Ashanti, which was used as proof that he was complicit. Ashanti never testified in his own defense. He was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide. When Judge Wagner told the jury's verdict, all Ashanti could do was rub his face with his hands and shake his head. Ashanti's mother and other members of the family had been watching the trial all week, and when the verdict was read, they were speechless. DA Grant Hubner was the prosecutor in all of the trials. Ron Allen was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Billy Griffin first had a mistrial, and then the judge sentenced him to 7.5 years in prison. Devin Seabury was sentenced to 8 years in prison and 7 years of extended supervision. Victor Stewart was sentenced to 16 years in prison and 7 years on parole after that. In the show notes, there will be a link to the case text for the State versus McAllister, because some of the guys began to say Ashanti was not even there and not involved, but they all agreed to testify against him because he was the youngest, and they thought he wouldn't get as much time. All of their statements were allegedly lies. So this is a little bit from casetext.com. It says, Devin Seabury's affidavit offered a second motive, namely that Devin Seabury falsely accused Ashanti McAllister at trial because an agreement was reached among witnesses that Ashanti would take the blame for Mr. Evon Young's murder, because Ashanti was the youngest person in the group and would face the least punishment if convicted. This alleged motive is similarly conclusory. The affidavit does not identify the witnesses referenced or explain when they reached an agreement, or where the agreement was made, or how they communicated the agreement among themselves. Additionally, as the state contends, the alleged agreement does not constitute a feasible motive for Devin Seabury's testimony against Ashanti McAllister. Neither Devin Seabury nor the other co-actors in this case testified in a way that left Ashanti to take the blame for the homicide. Devin himself testified at Ashanti's trial that Victor Stewart, Ron Allen, and Ashanti all played significant roles in the crime. Devin Seabury described Ron Allen suffocating the victim, and Devin Seabury agreed that while Ron Allen and Ashanti McAllister carried out the actual killing, the homicide was orchestrated by Victor Stewart. For his part, Victor Stewart testified that at the time of the homicide, he was, quote, running things, that he pushed Evon Young away while he begged for help, and that Evon was then strangled by Ron and shot by Ashanti. Ron Allen testified at his own trial that Victor Stewart directed the other gang members to commit the murder, that Victor ordered Ron to choke Evon, and that Ron Allen obeyed. The record is thus abundantly clear that neither Devin Seabury nor the other witnesses scapegoated Ashanti McAllister. Accordingly, Devin Seabury's affidavit simply does not state a feasible allegation that he implicated Ashanti in furtherance of a plan to make him, quote, take the blame for Evon Young's murder. Moreover, the recantations lack circumstantial guarantees of trustworthiness. And that is from casetext.com. During the media coverage of the search as well as the trial, Evon's gender was disrespected. The media called Evon by she or his actual birth name, and other things that are super disrespectful to transgender people. Some outlets apologized and corrected their errors, and some did not. It's so important that all of us that tell stories of transgender men and women, whether it's on a small scale or whether you're writing a book, magazine, news, radio, TV, etc., we all must do our part to make sure we are saying the correct pronouns and names and not using their birth names unless it's possibly a part of the story. For example, if a person was murdered for being a trans man or woman, and let's say they were born with the name Patrick, But then we should talk about their transitioning process and how a lot of these murders occur simply because they are transgender. The trans panic defense is also used way too much, as we saw in a past episode of mine about Jennifer Lauday. In this case, as far as I could find, all of these men thought Evon was a man, and this murder supposedly did not have to do with the fact that he was transgender. His mother Annette knew, and a few of his close friends and family, and they were just so supportive of him, and they loved him so much. To this day, none of Evon Young's remains have been discovered. Over the years, Evon's mom, Annette, has said, quote, "My son was a good person, and there's nothing that anyone can tell me that justifies what they did to him." End quote. Thank you so much for listening to today's special episode. I also want to thank CJ for coming on the show. I absolutely love you and your podcast. Until next time, stay safe and take care.